Richard Cohen's been writing for the Washington Post for a long time, and he's been getting in a lot of trouble from time to time, and this is no different. He wrote about Christie's Tea Party problem. It's Chris Christie, of course, governor of New Jersey, just got reelected. He's probably going to run in 2016 for president. And, you know, most of the op-ed is about how the Republican Party is too right-wing and Chris Christie would be considered moderate, and that's an issue for him. But in the middle of the article, he wound up writing some things that were incredibly strange. So first, let's show you what it is, and then we will judge. Sounds fun. People with conventional views, he explains, must repress. Now, he's referring to right-wingers here, but he does say conventional views. People with conventional views must repress a gag reflex when considering the mayor-elect of New York, a white man married to a black woman and with 2 biracial children. Should I mention that Bill de Blasio's wife, Shirlane McRae, used to be a lesbian? What? Now, that's an awfully strange thing to write. Now, you have to understand, Richard Cohen is supposed to be the liberal at the Washington Post. Now, it's one thing to say, hey, listen, I don't have a gag reflex, but I think people on the right do. First of all, I think that's actually a little unfair to the people on the right. Second of all, it's kind of a weird thing when you say people with conventional views, meaning like mainstream Americans, that when they, in the year 2013, when they see a biracial couple and their biracial kids, or a couple that's of mixed race and their biracial kids, that they would want to vomit? Man, that's at least a little out of touch. And we'll see if it's worse in a second. He continues, this family represents the cultural changes that have enveloped parts, but not all of America. To cultural conservatives, this doesn't look like their country at all. So, look, if he just made that latter point, saying, hey, you know what, the right wing, I think, might be uncomfortable with this kind of family, especially given that she was a lesbian again, who cares, but some in the right wing might care. That might have been fair. And if this is the first time Richard Cohen had said something along these lines, he might say, man, he put that really, really badly. I'm sure that if he apologized for it, it's not a big deal, saying, hey, I didn't mean like that I'm bothered by it. We'll get to whether he apologized in a second. But first, Richard Cohen's history. Well, it turns out it is chock full of inappropriate statements, to say the least. First of all, in 1998, the newspaper had to mediate a sexual harassment dispute between Richard Cohen and a 23-year-old female intern who worked at the Washington Post. Apparently, he asked the intern to stand up and turn around so that we can see why you were hired. Damn. Okay, now, of course, guess what happened? She was later let go. Richard Cohen stayed at the paper. Power. So that's point one. Point two. In the Stupid Mill rape case, to give you a sense of how he feels about gender issues overall, he called it so-called rape and said that it was merely a matter of decency rather than criminality. I mean, if a girl gets drunk and passes out in your home, of course, I mean, it's a little indecent to rape her over and over again and take pictures of it, but of course it's not a criminal action. This is the so-called liberal at the Washington Post. So you begin to get a sense of why a lot of progressives are frustrated with Richard Cohen in the Washington Post. Well, when we talk about another rape case, Roman Polanski, when he raped a 13-year-old, he said the victim, but he didn't just say victim, he put it in quotes. In other words, the so-called victim. She was 13. What's a so-called victim about that? Well, Roman Polanski gave her alcohol. I guess a 13-year-old shouldn't have accepted the alcohol, or should have accepted being raped by the man who was decades older than her at the time. And he says that Cohen says he dearly wishes the whole thing would go away already. Okay, point number 4. Not anywhere near done with Richard Cohen. In 2005, in a column, he blamed the spread of AIDS on not only reckless, but just plain disgusting behavior by gay men. This is the so-called liberal of the Washington Post. He went on to say about gay men, sometimes the victims need to be blamed. This is the case now with gays when their behavior is both stupid and reckless. What part of this guy is liberal? Okay, but you know what? This is the establishment's vision of a liberal. A guy who largely agrees with us, kind of vomits in his mouth when he sees a biracial couple or their kids, thinks that it's all the victim's fault. You know, a woman deserved to get raped. And by the way, on that Steubenville case, etc., he also blamed twerking and Miley Cyrus. It's all the ways the women's fault, right? In the case of AIDS, it's gay people's fault. And then, of course, we get to racial issues. Well, he said that he understood why George Zimmerman shot Trayvon Martin. He said, after all, he was wearing, Trayvon was, the 70-year-old, was wearing a uniform we all recognize. Okay, now look, on the show we already showed you hoodies and sweatshirts and how every, recognizable celebrity in the country wears a hoodie. And you've seen it in every one of those celebrity magazines. But when Miley Cyrus, or name it, any celebrity, white, black, it doesn't even matter, wears the hoodie, they're like, oh yeah, that's cool, that's a hoodie. But when a young black kid wears it, uniform of a thug. On which planet is this guy a liberal? On which planet should he continue to work for the Washington Post? Actually, on the planet where the Washington Post is actually super conservative and loves to put this guy out as their so-called liberal. Have I said that enough? All right, if you think all that was bad, I'm on to point number 7, and this will do it. In 1986, he defended store owners from banning black boys from their place of business, saying, well, I mean, obviously you can understand if they think all black kids would rob them. Now look, you can say that's 1986, that was a long time ago, and he at some point said, yeah, my critics might have been a little bit right about that one. I mean, banning all black boys, not the good ones, right? Now, he didn't add that last part, to be fair, okay? So he was criticized by some, like Zach Beauchamp at Think Progress, in wonderful ways. But when it comes to the Washington Post, no, he wasn't criticized at all. In fact, the publisher, Catherine Weymouth, called the article, quote, brilliant. By the way, the rest of the article was incredibly pedestrian. There was nothing brilliant about it at all. And finally, did Richard Cohen at least understand the errors of his ways? He said, yes, the controversy has been hurtful to him. He said that he was offended that people think he's a racist and that he's hurt by it. Now, of course, he doesn't give a damn if you were hurt by it. Why would he care about what you think, right? No, it turns out he's the victim, and he's hurt by your misinterpretation of his article. And finally, he says, if someone on the right wrote this, no one would care. That's actually not true. It would be odious either way. No one would make a big deal about it because I veer every once in a while away from orthodoxy, or maybe more than once in a while, I get plastered this way. See, that shows to me that he thinks orthodoxy is just like, just going along with a certain doctrine and saying, okay, this is the liberal point of view and it's to be mindless, etc. But he's such a rebel and he's so smart, and so he dares to tell people what others actually think. But the problem, Richard, is that they don't think that, you think that, right? And that's why you get in this kind of trouble.